Wanna get it on film? So cute. You wanna distract me? These are the consequences. Hi there, my name is Amanda, and this is Alder joining us today. And I am here to film my Pan Those Eyeshadows update. I am excited to be filming today. This is one of my favorite projects to watch and to participate in, and I'm excited to say that some new palettes are going to be rolling into the project for this next month. If this is the first video that you are seeing from me, I will link my playlist down below, along with my other panning playlists. And as a disclaimer, which I say in most of my videos now, please don't, not the camera. As a disclaimer, my cats enjoy distracting me while I sit down to film, so if you hear them in the background, please ignore them. So I'm going to go from the least amount of uses to the most amount of uses for each shade. So the first palette that I want to talk about is my ColourPop Singles palette, and the shade I've been working on is Earthshine. I will have a picture up on the screen of what it looked like last month, and this is what it looks like today. I have used it an additional one time this last month for a total of 3 uses within the project. That is not very impressive for being in the project for 2 months. I definitely was leaning into the warm toned looks this last month, and now that we have the snow on the ground, I tend to gear more towards the cooler, like especially icier tones for the snow time here in Alaska. So I anticipate this shade will be used more in November, and for that reason, I am going to be keeping it in the project. I debated rolling it out because I had only used it one time this last month, but I really want to try to push myself to get to the 15 uses with this shade. I did hit a bonus pan in this palette though. I hit a liner pan, which can we see? I hit a liner pan in this shade, so I am happy to say that I still have a bonus pan to be adding to my pan percentage. The next shade that I want to talk about comes from my Anastasia Beverly Hills Sultry palette. The shade I've been working on is Cinder, so I will have a picture up on the screen of what it looked like last month, and this is what it is looking like today. I have used it an additional 4 times this last month for a total of 6 uses within the project. My goal for these shades that already have pan in them is just to use them 10 times, so I am only 4 uses away. I am very close, and I definitely can see some pan expansion, especially between the introduction to today with those 6 uses. One of the challenges I gave myself was I really wanted to use this as a one and done type of shade. I was able to do that for a work look, and I feel like that was pretty manageable to maintain at work. So that is potentially a way that I will get my 4 uses going forward. But a lot of the times I was using twig and birch and either teak and or ember to kind of deepen the outer corner, and usually a little bit of dystopian as a liner shade. So I was definitely getting use out of the whole palette. I even used it with steampunk once. So that was, one of the goals within this project for me is to use the palette as a whole. So because this shade has 4 uses left on it, I was initially thinking that I could roll in another palette in its place with the idea that I would potentially hit those 4 uses over the next month pretty easily. Because I have had a month with only 2 uses on this shade though, I don't want to get ahead of myself. This shade in this palette are going to stay within the project. I'm not going to be preemptively rolling in a shade to replace Cinder. The next shade that I want to talk about comes from my Anastasia Beverly Hills Soft Glam palette, and last month I had rolled in the shade Cypress Umber. So I will have a picture up on the screen of what it looked like last month, and this is what it looks like today. My goal was to use this shade 10 times, and I was able to do that over the last month. And I think you can tell in the comparison pictures that there is a little bit of difference. I think I have worn out a little bit of the shade here in its corner, not the corner of the shade. But that's part of what I wanted to see, is like just see what that visual progress would look like with 10 uses on a shade. And I feel like so far it has been fairly significant, even with Cinder where I've only used it 6 times. So I'm happy that I've added that stipulation to this project. I've also expanded the pan a bit in Dusty Rose here. I used Rustic a lot with this palette. I played a lot more with just creating matte looks for work. That is how I got my 10 uses on this palette. I am able to roll it out of the project. The next palette I want to talk about is my ColourPop That's Taupe palette, and the shade I have been working on is Rock Steady. So I will have a picture up on the screen of what it looked like last month, and this is what it looks like today. I have used it an additional 8 times over the last month for a total of 12 uses within the project. It probably barely looks like there is any difference because the majority of the time I have used it, I have used a light hand and a fluffy brush to create a very diffused light look. There was one look that I did, which I should have posted, where I created a look on the weekend. I had used Python, Rocksteady, and Snake Eyes in particular, and I really liked how that look came out. I think I also used Cold Blooded in my outer corner because I wanted to play with that one because I haven't used it very much. And I really liked that. I don't think I've created that look before, so it's nice to have that in my arsenal of looks I can create without thinking about it. And this has been incredibly easy to reach for work. So I think I'm easily going to reach the 3 uses with this shade within the first potentially week of filming this. What I'm going to do is I am going to preemptively roll in a new palette with the idea that I'm going to reach 3 uses on this palette. There is no way I'm going to hit a pan within 3 uses, and I also don't anticipate, because of the way I've been using it, I don't anticipate there's going to be much visual difference to be showing. However, I will ask if you want to see the progress on this palette with the 3 additional uses. I will be happy to post that next month, but I will reach for this at least 3 more times in order to reach my 15 use goal. And then the last shade that I want to talk about comes from my Urban Decay Wild Greens palette, and the shade I was working on was Lo-Fi. So I will have a picture up on the screen of what it looked like last month, and this is what it looks like today. I used it an additional 7 times over the last month for a total of 16 uses within the project. So I am very happy to say I have reached my usage goal on this shadow, but I am a little disappointed that with those 16 uses, I wasn't quite able to hit pan. I have no pan in this palette to compare the shade to, so I have no idea if I am 2 uses away from pan or another 15 uses away from pan. And I have just been getting into more of the warmer browns and starting to lean into the cooler tones now that the snow is here. So I wasn't really keen on continuing to work on this palette, but that just gives me something to work towards next time that this palette is being focused on. I think that Lo-Fi makes a great transition shade within this palette, so I anticipate it will continue to be used frequently when reaching into it, but for now, I am going to put this palette away and let another palette come into the project to be focused on. So I did hit 1 bonus pan this month in my ColourPop Singles palette. So I did increase my total pans in my collection to 42. However, thanks to my husband, I did add a new eyeshadow palette into my collection this last month. So the total number of shades within my collection is now 266. So my pan percentage changed from 16.1% last month to 15.8% this month. So not the hugest drop, not going in the right direction though, the direction that I want to be going in. So my pan percentage and the total pans in my collection is going to be changing pretty significantly next month. So again, this is more of a hit as many pans as I can while rotating through everything, including my new things. So I'm going to be keeping in my ColourPop Singles palette. My ABH Sultry palette will be staying in as well. And my ColourPop Taupe palette will stay in for another 3 uses, and then I'm going to be rolling it out of the project. But today that means that I'm going to be rolling in 3 new shades from 3 new palettes. And as you know, I am randomizing in the palettes that are coming into the project, and then I have the opportunity to choose a shade myself, or else I have been randomizing the shade. So the first palette that was randomized into the project is the newest palette in my collection. It is the Anastasia Beverly Hills Cosmos palette. This has been on my wish list for about a year, and thanks to my husband, it's now in my collection, so I don't have to lust after it anymore. I decided I wanted to handpick the shade that I would be focusing on within this palette. And the shade I selected to work on is this first shade here in Super Cluster. I am wearing this on my eyes today. It looks very blue in the pan, but on the eyes, I think even from this distance, you can see that it has a very green tone to it. Which makes me think that it's going to pair well with this shade, and maybe even Galaxy here. This is my first time wearing this shade by itself. I don't have anything under it other than just a setting shade. And I have used this once also to pair on top of another shade, so as a topper shade. So I have used this shade 2 times already since I have brought this palette into the project. I will be curious to see how this plays with other shades. I feel like this look today is neutral enough that I could potentially get away with wearing this to work, but I will have to test my bravery with that. The next palette that was rolled into the project is the second newest palette in my collection. This is the Lunar Beauty Nude Prism palette. I brought this into my collection this summer. This is what my palette currently looks like. Those metallics are very shimmery. And I decided I wanted to randomize the shade to be rolled into this project. And the shade that was rolled in is this shimmer shade here in Sam. And I haven't played with this palette very much, but Sam and Laura here were the favorite shimmers for me within this palette. I think that goes for the same for a lot of people who have this palette. I'm happy that I got one of the cooler tone shades to be working on as I am going into the winter here in Alaska. I do anticipate this will be a little bit harder for me to use on a regular basis, just because I don't tend to wear shimmers to work. I have done No Pan Left Behind on this palette before, but I feel like there is still a lot of room to get to know this palette. And then the palette that is going to be replacing my ColourPop That's Taupe palette once I get my 3 uses is another ColourPop palette. It is my ColourPop Going Coconuts palette. This packaging is a little janky. This is what my palette currently looks like. So I have 5 pans in this palette, and I decided that I wanted to roll in, or I wanted to select the shade that was going to be rolling into the project. And what I took into consideration was that I rolled in 2 new shimmers, so very shimmer heavy color story this time. So I wanted to work on a matte shade, and I wanted to work on a shade that didn't have pan in it yet. So I decided for this next month that I am going to be focusing on the shade Lovely Bunch here. It is a warmer, neutral shade. I totally understand how these ColourPop mattes work. The only reason this has pan is because I used it 100 billion times, and this shade has the glitter in it, which makes the shade very soft. or maybe not soft, but there's a lot more kick up when reaching into the shade, so I know that's really the only reason why I got pan there. So 15 uses is not going to get me to pan here, but it is going to allow me to reach into this palette more often. I would have been happy no matter what time of the year this palette is rolled in. This is one of my favorites in my collection, and this is one where I would love to see pan in all of the shades within this palette. So I am very excited to be working on this for the next month. So this will be my new color story for the month of November. So these two are the only shades that are staying in from last month. I didn't swatch my Rocksteady shade from the taupe palette, but very shimmer heavy, so that's why I wanted to pick at least one matte to have in the project. Going forward, I might try to keep it more to like 2 to 3 mattes within the project. Yeah, I think the shimmer color story is going to be more challenging for me to work on a consistent basis. So I don't know if I'm going to have any rollouts this next month. I might if I am able to reach for the shade 4 more times, but these other shades might be a little more challenging to reach that 15 use goal at least within the next month. Potentially one more rollout, and we will see about that. Thank you for watching my video. I hope you'll consider subscribing before you go, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.